Hey, it's Liz D'Alto, and this is the Untamed the Wild Soul Woman podcast. From body image, sex, spirituality, money and relationships, to motherhood, creativity, business, communication, and desire, Untamed the Wild Soul Woman is the place to come for real stories and powerful advice to help you reclaim and redefine womanhood in the 21st century. Welcome to episode number 130 of the Untamed the Wild Soul podcast. I am your host, Elizabeth D'Alto, and today's guest is Katie Dalebout. Katie is the author of Let It Out, A Journey Through Journaling. And this interview is actually months in the making and proof that divine right timing is a thing. While trying to schedule this interview, Katie and I went back and forth what felt like a million times. We rescheduled, had a couple of little miscommunications. Then we finally did the interview, and I ended up deleting the file, and we had to redo it. That said, we finally did it. I got my act together, and I'm super glad because the conversation around healing from addictions, from eating disorders, to being a workaholic, self-help exhaustion, and journaling as an integration tool is really great in this episode. Some of the things we cover specifically are body diversity and why it's helpful to gain an appreciation for all shapes and sizes. All things journaling, all the ways, the different types of journaling and different purposes it can serve. And also, I remember this story I don't think I've ever told on the podcast before about a really, really interesting thing that happened with my journals in the beginning of 2013. So enjoy the episode. All the show notes, everything we mentioned can be found at untameyourself.com/episode-130. And if you want to continue the conversation, as always, visit us at untameyourself.com/Facebook, where we're always discussing what's going on in the podcasts and everything else in your wild soul world. Today, I have Katie Dalebout with us. You already heard me introduce her, let you guys know about her book called Let It Out. I love that Katie's book is straight up about journaling. Journaling is something that I've been doing. Katie, I think I told you this at some point in the couple of conversations we've had this year, that I've always been a journaler. Like, I literally remember my very first Dopey the Dwarf journal from the Disney store.
Yes, I remember you telling me that.
So awesome. I'm excited to dive into that and just in general do the usual Untamed the Wild Soul riff that we like to do with all of our guests. So, are you ready for your first question?
Yes.
What do you love about being a woman?
Oh my goodness. So hopefully it's cool with you if I tell everyone that we've actually done this before.
Yeah, tell them.
But the file got deleted, which I'm only saying because you asked me this before and I have no idea what I said. Yeah. And I don't know if you remember either. So I'm going to just let it come to me right now with what I love about being a woman. Wow. I love the thing that's coming to me today. I have no idea if this has anything to do with what I said before, and no one will ever know because that file is gone. But what's coming to me today is kind of, it sounds almost superficial, but I have been I always grew up being super girly and princesses and dressing up and doing my hair and all of that. And for whatever reason, that is the thing that just came to me. And it seems kind of trite with there's so much to womanhood and femininity that seems almost more important or more kind of interesting to talk about. But right now what's coming to me that I love about being a woman is like the female form. It's just so beautiful. I love, looking at other women and connecting with them and complimenting them and looking at other people's bodies and the way that they dress and really just loving myself and seeing myself in other women and being inspired by other women and how they not only just adorn themselves but carry themselves through the world. And being someone that's had so much body image stuff, it's so beautiful, and something that really helps me is to appreciate the body diversity that we have in the world. And I think the world would be so boring, and I'm just so grateful that we have the body diversity that we have. And I love, silently to myself and out loud, whenever I see something that I think is beautiful in other people, I really make it a point to compliment them, because I know that I love compliments so much and I love giving them just as much. So the thing that's coming to me today is just the beauty of the feminine body. I think there's nothing more beautiful than women and all of our whatever way that we want to dress and be, and just seeing the beauty in other people helps you to see it in yourself. So that was kind of a long-winded answer. I hope it made somewhat of sense, but that's what came to me in this moment.
It made so much sense, and I love it. So I don't know. Have you ever heard of a photographer named Jade Beal?
No, I haven't.
I believe it's Beall. Find her on Instagram because she takes pictures. She actually takes a lot of pictures of moms, a lot of like breastfeeding or like women who have scars and like the body diversity, which is cool. I don't know that I've ever heard those two words used together before, and I could not possibly agree with you more. I think I have a vague memory of talking about this on your podcast because at the time when you interviewed me, I was going to pole dancing, and it was like regularly that I was being brought to tears just by like how beautiful a woman is, and even catching myself with the conditioning still alive in my brain somewhere in the recesses of my mind of like almost having a moment of judgment and being like, oh, I'm so proud of that woman for doing this thing, even though, and having like a little judgment that like she wasn't like, quote, in shape or something, which is a person going through that the last couple of years of like not being in my best shape. I'm with you. Like bodies are art. When you look back at like the art of like centuries ago, it was different, right? Like if a body was thicker or more plump, it was actually a sign of class and not like that you weren't out in the fields like working and carrying stuff, you know? So I love that. And, you know, too, even being in like the times that we're in right now, skin tone is actually something I'm always so drawn to. Skin tone, skin texture, freckles. Like, I was at a wedding a couple months ago, and this woman had like the darkest, most beautiful, she's African American, amazing skin. And I found like what you said about compliments, I'm the same. Like, I'll compliment random people on the street all the time. And I said to her, I'm like, at the risk of like being offensive, I hope you just wouldn't take it that way. I just think you have the most beautiful skin I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, it's so fun to be a woman or a girl or whatever you identifying in this gender that I'm in and loving it. And I always have since I was young, and I really embrace it now, especially like you were saying, going through all of the body image stuff, because when I was so in that place that unfortunately so many women are, and so many women will go through their entire lives just trying to manipulate their body to be a different size than their natural shape, and trying so hard to make themselves smaller. Like as women, we physically try to make ourselves small, which is so silly. And it just irks me that people are going to go through life dieting and not making their lives as a whole their masterpiece, but trying to make their body their masterpiece. And that just seems so sad to me. And because I relate to it so much, because I was so in that place and am susceptible to even that diet conversation of trying to manipulate your size and shape purely on the basis of fitting with the societal ideal of a norm that right now includes thinness. And like you were saying before, Elizabeth, how in the past, a plumper, thicker body shape was revered because that was a sign of wealth and that was a sign of abundance, where now the sign of wealth and the sign of abundance is thinness, because it requires money and resources to have the special food and have the time to prepare your food and the time to exercise and the money for the memberships and blah, blah, blah. It costs money and resources, so it's a sign of this prestige to have a thin, toned body shape. And, you know, that's changing with the appreciation of body diversity and this conversation and health at every size and so many different movements happening, but it's slow. And I actually just rushed home for this interview, but I was working in a coffee shop right before this, and I had to quickly put in my headphones because the women behind me, you know, you can kind of overhear in a coffee shop, were having this like very detailed conversation about weight and numbers and how at her last weigh-in and she's on this diet and she's getting ready for this person's wedding and boop, 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 boop. And it wasn't with judgment. It was just with sadness, because these women were so beautiful to me. And the fact that they didn't like their bodies so much that they were having this conversation made me so sad. And obviously it wasn't a time for me to turn around and be like, wait, but you guys are really beautiful and amazing. But later I was in line and I just complimented this woman on something else. And anyway, I wish that I could, like, if I had a superpower, it would be to like implant information into people's brains to just know that they were enough as they are and they
Yeah.
didn't need to do these crazy things with dieting. And I think I so deeply feel that way because I was so in that for so long. So anyway, that's just,
I love it.
another.
And, it's really fascinating. And I think about that all the time because one of the things I've been using this term lately, I call it spiritual special ops. And it's like me taking a look at things and going, how can I insert anything that might just, it's almost like throwing a very subtle wrench in someone's mindset, the constructs, the programming
Yeah,
or the conditioning that might just make them go, wait a minute, what I've always known might not be the only truth
totally.
or the only possibility, right? And it's, of course, there's context in which it's appropriate and which it's not. But that's the cool thing about having a platform and a voice. We get to like ask questions and bring these things up. And, we get so many notes from people that are like, I never thought about that before. And
Right.
and now they are, and it's really cool. And whether it makes someone sad or whether it's just like something I would love to see differently in the world, it's nice that there are many, many different options and many different ways for people to look at these things. So you alluded to it a couple times. I'd love to know, just for people on the show who are not familiar with you, can you tell us a little bit about what your body journey was like?
Yeah, I'll kind of give like I'll try to be brief version of it, and feel free to flesh out anything that you think people would want to know more about. But basically, I grew up never really feeling satisfied with my body and just a really big fear of gaining weight and a fear of that when I got older. That's just what happened. And my mom has always been heavy since I was born. And so I think that her dissatisfaction with her body, and she would always use the phrase, when someone asked her, oh, have you lost weight, she would always say, always trying. And so I think that kind of implemented in my mind that, like, this is not something you can control and you're always going to want to change it, but you can't, and it really just kind of got in there. And I was never the biggest kid in my class, but I was never the smallest. And I remember being a size bigger than all of my friends. And that, for whatever reason, not that there's anything wrong with that at all, but as a child, that just kind of got into my brain as something that was bad or wrong, or that, my mom looked different from other moms, or I was a bigger size than the other kids. And it just was a lot. And luckily, as a child, I didn't really act on these things too much, other than I made like some weird rules for myself of like, I can never eat more than my friends. Like, if they want one piece of pizza and I want two, I'm only going to have one if they have one, And I
That's
was just like,
fascinating. I've done
yeah,
stuff like that.
yeah, it's kind of weird. Like, I was on a different podcast, and she was saying how, when she goes out to eat with people, she always wants to know what the person that she's with is ordering first, because she's like, well, if they're gonna go mac and cheese, I'm not gonna go salad, but if they go salad, I don't want to go mac and cheese, because then, like, and I totally get that, and I don't even know if that's really like a diety thing, and almost it's just like you kind of want to eat a similar thing than with the person that you're with sometimes. And I think that that's normal and fine. But anyway, I just kind of set that parameter for myself as a kid. But luckily, as a kid, your life is very controlled by your parents. You're not the one doing the shopping or buying the food, or you're not in control of your schedule and your time and your exercise or your movement. And so none of my disordered habits with food in my body really happened until college, when, that's the first time for many of us that you're in charge of your life a bit more than in the past, for sure. So in college, the quick version of this is that it really spiraled into an eating disorder, where I was obsessively dieting and obsessively controlling my food, and really doing a lot of research on the internet, and just like adding in a lot of rules for myself, until I was extremely underweight and in treatment. And then I thought I could control even healing the eating disorder by becoming orthorexic, which is really just another eating disorder. And for people who are unfamiliar with that term, it's an obsession with healthy foods and healthy eating.
Yeah.
And some people get into it on the basis of, wanting to control their mortality and wanting to, be super healthy. But for me, if I was really honest, my orthorexia was really just an extension of my anorexia with just different habits. So
Yeah.
it wasn't really for the purpose of being super physically vital and physically healthy and energized. It was really more for the purpose of aesthetics, of manipulating my size and shape on the basis of looking a certain way that wasn't natural to my frame. And that's what I tried to do for many, many years, until I learned about health at every size and body diversity, like I mentioned before, and, doing really the deep body image work and looking at weight as a social issue and a political issue, and, getting angry and looking at this from a sociological and anthropological mindset and a feminist mindset or a feminist perspective. Like, looking at that was really beneficial for me for letting go of a lot of my beliefs and a lot of my dieting and a lot of my orthorexic tendencies and becoming a normal eater, and, looking at, yes, food is nourishment, and yes, food is fuel, but it's also love. It's also pleasure. It's also connection with people, and such amazing things come from food. And so I was really denying myself all of that by, trying to eat in this perfectly clean, controlled way. And so really letting go of that, taking off all the Velcro from that little by little by little, and learning to enjoy my life again, and learning to have creativity, and getting to know myself beyond my body and find my worth beyond my physicality really became what I learned to do in the past several years. And so anyway, that's kind of in my journey, at least with a body image and the food stuff, and kind of an expedited, way. But I can tell you more about that.
Thank you. So something I'm curious about, and it's a pretty personal question, so if you're like, it's a little too much, feel free to say so. But I find that with people who have any kind of addictive or super controlling, I don't even want to ascribe it to personality, but any habits or tendencies or history of that often they'll heal from one thing and then apply it right on to something else. So I'm curious, did you put it on to anything else after did you move out of that and then become like a workaholic or something
sure
else?
Did.
Or yeah?
Sure did. Yeah, you nailed it.
Oh, interesting.
You said it right there. Yeah, I really applied that same logic to my work, to my creative work, to, all sorts of the work that I did. And I kind of woke up one day, somewhat recently, because that was the second one and about a year ago. And I was like, wait a minute, I don't have a life. I need to focus on community. And I think we kind of have these different buckets in our life. We have, the bucket for our career and our creativity, and that one might be really filled. And then we have the bucket for, our health and our physicality, and that one might be really full at some times. And then we have another bucket for, our relationships and our romantic relationships and our, connection with other people and our friendships and our community. And, that one might be full at times. And then there's another box for or bucket for our relationship with our higher self or our spirituality or our relationship with, something greater than ourselves. And I think, the goal is we only have so much water. We only have so much stuff inside of us that we can give to all these different buckets. And I was putting everything I had for a long time into the bodies one, into the vitality one, into the, dieting one, basically for me. But then I took all of that water and I started to put it into the work one, and the other ones were really dry. So I now I'm trying to redistribute that water, and I'm focusing on my life. I'm going through this new thing, and I don't know if I told you about this before, Liz, but I sort of just like made this up, but I really want my whole life to feel like a vacation. Like I'm trying to just like do a life vacation thing. Yep. And I'm focusing on my life more than my work, more than, anything else, because that's the most important thing, is the relationships, is the people. And yeah, so I totally did exactly that. I applied my same addictive patterns that I had with my body to work. And, in the last year or so, I've really been, it served me. It kind of, put a fire under my butt to, write a book at a pretty young age and build up my podcast and do the work that I'm doing now. But it's not that I'm not doing a podcast and I'm not writing now. It's just I'm doing it in a more intentional way, and I'm focusing on my life more. And my favorite comedian has this thing where he says, you have to live a life worth commenting on to be a good comedian. And I think you can apply that to any work you do, that like I'm better for the work that I do if I'm really filled up creatively through my connection with myself, my higher self, spirituality, and also people, and having fun and just doing other things. That has nothing to do with my work is really impactful for me.
Yeah, cool. You said a couple things here that I want to go back to, which are really fascinating, really helpful. So the buckets thing, I have to ask you, this is hilarious. I'm a geek about synchronicity. Are you into Jonathan Field's work at all?
It's super funny. His book is sitting on my desk. I'm actually, and remember how I told you I need to be done at 6? I'm interviewing him at 6. So that's totally based off of his book.
I interviewed him earlier today. And so I was like, the bucket thing. I get it. I was like, there's a piece of me that really wanted you to be like, no, I was just saying that.
No, it's totally,
so
I was just gonna say, yeah, it totally has to do with him because I was just reading his book earlier.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so funny. I was literally doing the same thing over the weekend because I just interviewed him earlier this afternoon. That's so funny. So what's interesting to me, and I shared this with him as well, is I do this thing called like a life inventory. And basically his whole book is about simplicity and like not having things be so complex and all these things. So his bucket system is basically the way less complex version of my life inventory. So it's like, as you were saying that, I was like, oh, this makes so much sense, and the irony. But it must be like when things like that happen, I'm like, cool, this is a loud and clear message for me right now, and obviously for you guys listening too. If it's coming up for me, it's coming up for you because you're hearing me talk about it. So where in our lives are we making things really complex? Where in our lives are we putting like all of our eggs, all of our water, all of our energy towards one basket? Where are we allowing other things to be drained and not priority? I love the thing you said about life being a vacation. My friend Heather and I used to talk about that a lot. And literally for a number of years, basically from like 2011 to last year, I wore this like black coconut that was like my fragrance. And when people would be like, oh my God, that smells amazing, I'd be like, yeah, I like to smell like I'm always on vacation.
Yeah, that's great.
So how are you cultivating that? Oh, wait, I want to share one more thing with you. So recently, within the last couple of weeks, one of my frustrations, I've also been more intentionally cultivating community this year, and also realizing that I don't have a desire to have like a ton of community. Like I have a handful of close friends, and then other than that, I enjoy cultivating my community that I'm building. But one of the things that I'm totally losing my train of thought there. I got so excited about it, and then it went south. This happens to me almost once every single podcast episode. It's totally gone. So I'll just have you tell me how you're cultivating community. Oh, nope, there it is. It's back. Okay.
Okay.
One of the things I find so frustrating is we live in a time where people are so busy. And I enjoy spontaneity. Like, I enjoy being able to text someone at like 4 and be like, hey, want to go to dinner tonight in 3 hours? And being able to get a yes to that every once in a while, instead of someone being like, oh, can we do it next week? I find that to be so irritating that people are so friggin' busy all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, for me, the summer, where I live, at least, because I live somewhere that we very much have the seasons, and winter is the longest one. And so everyone here, it's very much exciting to be outside and hang out with people. And I think that the fall and winter are more internal, and I can kind of go in the cave and make stuff and be more busy in a work sort of a way. But I made a very intentional choice this summer to put my focus on my life above anything else. And so I have been very busy since the spring because I had this book come out, and I was doing a book tour, and I was traveling a bunch, and I was doing a ton with my podcast and being on other people's podcasts. And I felt like I just had something on my calendar at every moment. But I've been really intentionally canceling things, moving things around, simply because I need to spend time at my friend's pool and just be. And, you know, in Jonathan Field's book, this comes from Elizabeth Gilbert, but she talks about this in Big Magic, but you really have to take care of the human animal that you are first, and before any creative output can come out, or before you can be anything valuable, anything that anyone can connect with, you have to really take care of yourself. And I'm really into like personality tests and such, and I'm an extrovert, but I'm an ENFP, so that's the very least, if anyone's familiar with anyone's familiar with Myers-Briggs personality testing, it's the very least of the extroverts. So the most introverted extrovert. So I get my energy from being around people, but I also get my energy from recharging and spending time alone. And so, like, for instance, this is just like a kind of a silly example, but I had a party on Sunday night, and it was so much fun, and I had everyone over to my apartment on the porch, and like it was fantastic and great, and connecting people and my friends meeting each other that maybe didn't know each other, and it was a really great time. But I felt completely drained on Monday, and I had plans Monday too, and I had to just cancel them and spend the day with one person doing basically nothing, and that's just what I needed to do that day. So I think it's just about listening to what you need and not pushing yourself to get things done, and focusing on self-care and focusing on the human animal that we are, and just listening to what you need, not necessarily from a physical perspective, although that's all important too, but from an emotional perspective of like, who do you need to spend time with? Do you need to spend time in a group? Do you need to spend some time alone? And not forcing yourself to do that. And I think the biggest way that you can actually make sure that happens is to create white space in your calendar. And that's something that I've been doing. Like, I block off big times in my calendar because my schedule does get so full that now I'm enjoying the white space. And I think this might be like an only child thing, but I found that I have like a fear of boredom that that was maybe why I would fill my plate so darn full. Like, I would, ever since high school, I noticed this as a problem with me, but I would just like take on too much. I would be involved in everything and do every project and say yes to every party. And like, I think it was just this fear of like being by myself and being bored. And so I would take on too much. And then in college, I remember doing the same. And I remember my boyfriend, like in college, having a conversation with me about it and being like, you take on too much stuff and then you're stressed out and I have to help you. And that stresses me out. So please stop,
Oh,
and then I've done it in my adult life a ton as well. And so I think I don't know if that's just like my interpretation of maybe, getting to know myself better and learning that about myself. But now I really focus on like, I'm not afraid of white space. I'm not afraid of having nothing to do for a day. I always fill it. I always figure out something to do. It's better if I have the white space, but that's just something I know for myself is leaving the space for spontaneity. If I have every second of my calendar booked, when you text me at 4, I'm not going to be able to go to dinner, So I want to be able to be a person that can say yes to dinner at least sometimes.
Yeah, and I love, so the idea of space, something I started doing this year, I just decided I am not going to take calls or schedule calls on Fridays.
Nice.
And I literally stick to it about 97% of the time. Something I faced, and I'm going to share this in response to something you said in case anyone else deals with it, is I would notice a request would come in. I'm thinking of something specific. A friend of mine who I haven't seen in a while, it's like, hey, are you available for blah, blah, blah? And I was like, no, I'm not available. And then there was a piece of me during that day where, because the day is for me. It's for study, it's for reading, it's for catching up on stuff or whatever. It's my friggin' day. And I was about to post something on Instagram, and I remembered thinking, oh God, I can't post that I'm just like hanging out at the beach because so-and-so asked me if I was available, and I said I wasn't. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not available. I'm hanging out with myself. And it was a cool noticing that I felt like it wasn't okay to just have a day to myself and not be willing to fill it with other people's agenda, right?
Yeah, I've totally felt that way with social media. It's like, oh, well, should I Snapchat that I'm doing this when I told someone else that I was unavailable? Like, I don't know. It's hard to see that because there is that judgment of other people, but like they don't know the backstory of like, you've been on nonstop calls for a week or you've been on the road, and they don't know that like, yes, you could have technically not gone to the beach that day and said yes to them, but then would you have showed up as your best self for what they needed? Probably not. You're going to be much more of a nourished human being if you reschedule it to another time, take that time for yourself, and then show up with like vigor and excitement and passion because you have that within you, which you wouldn't if you hadn't taken the day at the beach, right?
And ultimately, that's what I decided. I'm like, you know what? If someone's going to see this and interpret this as she said she wasn't available, and they want to say something to me about it, I'll be like, yeah, you're right. I wasn't available. I didn't say I was doing something else. Like that's what I think is so important about not lying when it comes to scheduling and stuff like that, and not making excuses. I actually had this was a conversation going on in one of my Facebook groups earlier where someone was like, didn't want to tell people at work what she was doing. And she knew they were going to ask, and she kind of felt obligated to tell them. But I was like, you don't need to explain yourself. Like there's a way to tell the truth, but you don't have to divulge every single detail, right? So if I'm just saying I'm not available, that's 100% true. I don't need to explain myself to people and then just open up these opportunities for people to make meaning or judge or take something personally or whatever. Like, this is a big lesson I learned this year from one of my mentors, is these levels of truth, right? Like, it's 100% true. I'm not available. And when I explain myself, then I open myself up for all these other energetic connections that aren't necessarily going to be helpful to me or the other person. It's almost kinder and saves time to just be like, this is what you need to know. I'm not available. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, totally.
What's up, Wild Ones? Quick break in the show to let you know 2 things that are going on in the Wild Soul world in the next couple months, in case it's something that you might really find some value or some usefulness in. Number 1 is that I am opening up Wild Soul Insider, which is a beautiful community of women who listen to the podcast, love the podcast, and wanted to go deeper than these episodes. They are an extra 2 sessions a month where we deconstruct and create more how-tos and useful, actionable tips for all the things that you're learning in the show. So Wild Soul Insider, you can find the details and you can join between September 14th and 29th at untameyourself.com/WS Insider. The second thing I've got going on is a live event coming up in San Diego on November 4th with Susanna Frioni, who, if you're listening to the podcast and you have not listened to her episodes, she's episode number 9 and episode number 99. You might want to check those out. We have incredible synergy together. She's a really close friend of mine, although she lives all the way on the other side of the planet in Australia. So she's going to be in San Diego. We are hosting an event called Love, Sex, Desire, Untamed. It's going to be an amazing evening of sensuality, embodiment, feminine movement. We're going to talk about sex. We're going to workshop. We're going to do Wild Soul movement. And then Susanna is going to lead us through her signature sacred dance party. It's going to be an amazing time. And you can find details for that at susannafrioni.com/LSD Untamed. As in Love, Sex, Desire, Untamed. It's on November 4th. It's here in San Diego. We already have people flying in from Canada, from San Francisco, from New York City, and other places, so you do not need to be local to attend. We would love to get to meet you guys in real life and have an amazing experience together. So check that out if you're interested, and back to the show. So let's talk about journaling.
Let's do it.
I've noticed over the years, God, I love having sketchbooks. Sometimes I love having a little journal that I can carry it with me everywhere. It doesn't make my bag heavy. Sometimes I love guided journaling. I've created one of those for Wild Soul Movement. Having prompts is cool. Sometimes free flow is cool. Sometimes just writing about there's a bajillion ways to journal. How do you teach people?
Well, yeah, there's a billion ways to journal is really the thing that I say. And I always say just start, there's no way to do it wrong other than to judge what you're writing and edit yourself. I think the whole point of journaling is that it's for you and it's a time for you to be vulnerable and real and not have to filter. Whereas in life, and even with very close friends, even with, perhaps a therapist or a coach, we might filter even just a little bit. I know for me, that's why I'm not like you, Liz, and the fact that you've been journaling since you were very young. I found it at a much older age, not till I was in college and I was going through something in treatment for my eating disorder where, nobody recommended for me to journal. I was surrounded by coaches and therapists and family and friends and lots of people who were very worried about me, but I felt dreadfully alone. And intuitively, I was reading a lot of self-help at the time, and always, but I found myself in the self-help section yet again with just self-help exhaustion. And I was like, I know all of these. I've read all of these, but I'm not integrating these. Where do I go next? And I had a gift card to this bookstore. And so I wandered out of the book section into the stationery section, and I bought myself this colorful journal, and I just wrote in it, super unfiltered, really raw, really real. I was able to be as dark as I wanted to be and say the things I was too afraid to tell my therapists or my coaches, because I'm a people pleaser, and I think a lot of people can relate to this, or they've told me that they can. I still wanted her to like me, like I still wanted, I didn't want to say all of it, and I didn't want to claim all of my lightness either. I say all the darkness, or, the lightness of like, these are my really big lofty goals that people might laugh at me for, but like I could write those down. I could write about them because it was just for myself. I could have this experience of being completely me, and that helped me develop self-awareness. And so the more I journaled, the better I felt. It was cathartic for me. It made me feel relief. And over the years, when people would come to me with things that they were going through, because I shared my story online, a lot of it was eating disorders and then, other things as well, I started to kind of say, to my friends or people I was talking with in internet sort of a way, like, maybe, do you want to try journaling on that? I know it's kind of weird, this like thing, journaling. I don't know. Do you want to try it? And they'd be like, oh, I'm not a writer. I wouldn't have anything to say. No, thank you. And I would just offer them the advice to just try it, just to see what comes up. And I would give them prompts. I would give them a question to do some self-inquiry with, and to just start writing and see what came up. And they had similar results to me, of the fact that they felt relief and they felt like they got to know themselves a little bit better. They developed the self-awareness, which was really impactful, because we go through life wearing these masks, a different mask at work, a different mask with our family, with our romantic relationships, with our friendships, with the work we do, all of these different masks that we wear. And you're able to take those off and just be you that you came into the world with, you that you are today. It might be different than how you were a year ago. And you're able to just ask that question to yourself of like, how are you feeling? And that's really how the book came to be, and how I tell people to get started with journaling is, if you ask a good question, you're likely to get a great answer from your intuition. And it's a really great time to hear from your intuition. So my book is essentially that. It's 55 great questions. They're different exercises and areas, from getting organized to feeling feelings to healing things to revealing things to you. And they're, I say it's like a scavenger hunt for your mind, essentially. It's a way to develop self-awareness, everything from clearing clutter to helping with relationships. It's all in there.
I love that. And it's always fascinating. I've been running my Wild Soul Movement program for a little over 2 years now, and I'll have women go, I've done these journaling prompts before, and every time I go back, it's similar to the experience you had in the beginning of the interview, where you're like, I have no idea what I said to the "what do you love about being a woman" question before, but here's my answer right now. And I've had a couple of people on the podcast more than once now, and they're like, I don't know what I said last time, but like, here's what it is for me now. And it's cool, because we are like, if you're on this podcast, if you listen to my show, or if you listen to Katie's show, you're someone who's on a growth path anyway. So the likelihood that you are today who you were even a month ago, or 3 years ago, or a couple years ago, it's pretty slim. There might be some core fundamental things about you that are still similar, but a lot has probably changed. A lot has probably been different. And so to even revisit some of these things, and here's what's cool. Something I love to teach people is, and I didn't make this up, to always measure backwards. I think so often we're looking out on the horizon, what's next, what's next, and evaluating our progress based on how far we are from some finish line that actually we never allow ourselves to reach. It just keeps moving every time, right? Like, we don't celebrate, oh, I got from point A to point B, yeah, and then look back at the journey from point A to point B and be like, damn, like I crushed it, or I learned all these things. And instead, point B just turns into C, D, E, F, and we don't celebrate like each milestone along the way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And going back to what you were talking about before, about how quickly we change, I heard today, listening to a podcast, that every 5 years, all of our cells are even completely different. And like, we don't even have the same body every 5 years, which kind of blows my mind. And then in my favorite movie, I feel like these things connect. There's this line in my favorite movie where one of the characters says, every 5 years, like clockwork, I realized how much of a asshole, am I allowed to say that?
Yeah.
I was gonna say a bad butt. If you watch Stranger Things, the
Yeah,
one of the
yeah,
little
yeah, yeah.
kids, the kids from that were all on
Jimmy Fallon,
Fallon.
I saw this.
Did you see
And it
that?
was so confusing.
Really?
Like, if the kid would have just said the thing, like, it was actually a really awkward moment because he
I
was
thought it was so
trying to
adorable.
censor himself.
I thought it was so adorable. So for people listening, one of the little kids on Stranger Things on Fallon was like, "Oh yeah, she's such a bad butt." Instead of saying badass, he was like, "Such a bad butt." He was like, "That's what I say instead." And I was like, "Oh my god, that's adorable." So my friend and I keep saying like, "Oh my god, you're such a bad butt." Like we keep saying
it is actually super cute.
But anyway, so the point of this movie was he's like, every 5 years, like clockwork, I realized how much of an asshole I was 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that line resonates with me so much because I think it's so true. Like we look back at our past selves with such like I cringe, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was such a mess. But really it's like, I think just honoring like, wow, that's so who I was then. And I've come so far and it's okay.
Yes.
Instead of looking back and cringing, being like, wow, that's so, who I was then, and look how far I can change from there, and just honoring that because that's what helps you move forward, like you were saying.
Totally. A conversation I've had a couple times over the years with people and in some of my groups is, what do you do with your journals? And I used to be, before I started writing books, I would burn them every couple years. And then now to look back and kind of appreciate, do that measuring backwards thing on like, man, look how far I've come. Like, this is what I was writing. This is what I was thinking. This is who I was being just a couple years ago. But then now I'm keeping it to like, keep track of some of the stories because I don't have a fantastic memory. But it's really interesting. So I'll ask you that question. What do you do with your journals, with your old journals?
Yeah, so I've been getting that question a lot as well, obviously, with the topic that I've been being interviewed about a lot lately, since journaling's the topic of my book. But I always frame myself as, I'm not an expert in journaling. I'm not an expert at all. I'm just a cheerleader for it. I'm an enthusiast of it. It works for me, and this is kind of my opinion on it. And I think everyone's has different experiences with this. If people have, had a situation where they've been really vulnerable and real in their journal, and their trust was broken when someone, read their journals or found their journals, I think, it's really different. Knock on wood. Luckily for me, I haven't had that experience, so I don't think about it as much. I tend to have a lot of different journals. People started gifting me a lot of journals when they knew that I was journaling, and I started talking about this, and they were really beautiful, these like really beautiful journals. And I found that I wasn't being as authentic and unfiltered and real in these beautiful journals because I felt like my words needed to match how beautiful the actual physical journal was.
Oh,
so
interesting.
Yeah, so I find now that I keep those journals, and I use those journals for like my gratitude journals. I have one that I'm looking at right now that's my quote journal for 2016, where I just write down quotes that I hear from people overhearing them in a coffee shop or a cab driver or on a podcast or in a book, whatever. I write them down in there and then go back and look at them. Or, a gratitude journal, something where, all of the content is really positive. But when I'm doing like more free-flowing morning page type situation or an exercise or something, more where I want to be more unfiltered and more real, I use a legal pad, or I use, a sheet of paper that I don't really care about. And I always tell people to have a legal pad, and just where you can cross off and you can be, you don't have to worry about what the quality of the writing is. It's, if you're writing for someone else to read it, that's not journaling. Like that's great and that's helpful, and that's like writing a blog post, or that's like writing a letter. That's good and great job, do it, but that's not journaling, So I think having that actual, something that you don't care about as much that can be deleted and thrown away is really great. So what I do is I usually have all of these legal pads that I finish. And when I finish one, I'm all about, Marie Kondoing my entire life and minimalism and just like throwing things away. So I usually like look it over just in case there's any gems in there. I kind of mine it for any gems, any like, things that I want to remember, or, moments I might want to return to later, and I'll take those out. I'll like write them in a document on my computer. I'll, do something with them, and then I'll just throw it away. I'll just throw away the pad, and I don't need it anymore. that's what I do. In my book, all of the different exercises kind of require you, or many of them, to do them in different places. There's one that has to be done on your phone. There's one that has to be done on your computer, maybe a couple. There's some that, require you to rip out the page and bring it somewhere, and you have to do something with the piece of paper. Some of them you have to burn the piece of paper. Like, there's a lot of different activities that require you to do it in different,
cool.
Types of places. But for the most part, I think do what works for you, like I really say, like, you do you on this, just like everything else. Like, if you want to write in a really beautiful journal all your vulnerable stuff and then keep it next to you or throw it away after, or, keep it forever, I think that's fine. I think whatever works for you is best with this, just like with anything else.
I'm like you. I do different things. One of the things that goes back to our conversation earlier about like prioritizing life, something I started doing is separating having a personal journal and then having something I use for business. So for example, I will, like, all my podcast notes for show notes and stuff, I keep that, like, I have a journal for that. I'll put to-do lists in there. I'll brainstorm on projects and programs and things that I'm working on, and that goes in a separate journal. And then in a more personal one is literally everything else, because there was something for me where my business is very personal, but I still had a desire to really be honoring what's going on in my life that is not necessarily directly correlated or connected to the business. Oh my God. I don't think at any point in any of the conversations we've had, I've told you my most like outrageous journaling story. Did I tell you what happened in my journals when I was moving from New York City?
No.
All right, this is cool, and I know you have to wrap up, and I'm watching the clock, and so I'll tell you this, and then I'll ask you one more question, and we'll wrap it up.
Yeah.
So when I was moving, December 2012, I'm moving out of my New York City apartment. I threw away a bunch of books. I threw away a bunch of journals. This is why if I get rid of journals now, I burn them, because I threw away my stuff. And I when you live in New York City, sometimes throwing out your stuff is literally like piling your shit out on the curb, and then sanitation comes and takes it on garbage day. And that was the case. So I moved to California, and probably, I think this was around February. So this was in December. Around February, I get a voicemail, because one of my journals had, those spaces. I always fill out those spaces in the beginning where it says like your name and your phone number in case you ever lose it or something. Right. So I get a friggin' message from a guy who had found my journals at a bus stop somewhere in Manhattan, nowhere close to where I had lived.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God, that is my most personal, like the deepest, most intimate. And at this point, this was 2013. So it's not like my brand was all built out or like, quote, people knew who I was as like much as now. But there was this feeling I had in my body that was like, oh, the stranger has like the most intimate things of my life. Holy shit. But the message, Katie, it was like this mystical thing. I was like, if there are earth angels, this was an earth angel. Because like the way the man was speaking, he was like, what it really was for me, Katie, was this man checking in to see if I was really willing and ready to let go of all that stuff. Because he was like, I have your things. I found them. Like, I don't know if they got misplaced, if you need these things, or if you were like wanting to let them go, but like whatever. So I couldn't even bring myself to call him back. So I texted and I was like, hey, like if you have that stuff, it's not stuff I need anymore. You can chuck it, burn it, throw it away, keep it if it's helpful for you. Thank you so much for letting me know, but like I'm good. I don't need it. And then his message back was really something like, great, like blessings on your journey, like, or like, may you like whatever, find whatever it is you're looking for. Something kind of like wishing me the best in my forward journey. It was a really, unbelievable experience, but I really took it as it was life going, are you sure? You just let go of a whole life and a whole lot of things. Like, are you sure? And me being able to be like, yes, I am sure and I trust. It was wild.
Oh man, what a cool story.
Really, I almost forgot about it until like as you were saying that. I was like, man, why don't I, when you said you throw them away, I had this like little bit of panic, and I was like, oh, here's why I'm panicking. I don't ever do that.
Now I have panic.
But anyway, so under the this whole thing is about untaming yourself, coming back to your true nature, which it sounds like you've been able to really do that and connect through the art of journaling and the practice of journaling. But is there anything else I didn't ask you, whether it relates to journaling or just relates to, you've gone through so much healing and transformation. You mentioned self-help exhaustion earlier, so that I know that you've studied and you've really taken in a lot of information. Anything to share as we wrap up on, being yourself, honoring your true nature, and as you continue to evolve?
Sure. I mean, I guess I'll just share something that has helped me recently, and I think is really my new goal in life. And it kind of speaks to that point about self-help exhaustion. It's just like all of the podcasts that you listen to, all of the books that you read, all of the different perspectives out there, essentially a lot of them are saying the same thing, but just in different ways. It's kind of like how Mexican food, some people like nachos, some people like Doritos, some people like burritos, some people like, whatever, tacos. But at the end of the day, it's all corn and cheese and beans or whatever, right? It's the same nutrients, just in different forms. And I think, however you come to it, whether it's through, Elizabeth's work or mine or Jonathan Fields or whoever, you're getting this great information in a way that feels good to you. And I think that that's fantastic. However, it's really important that you just get to know yourself. And my biggest goal and the biggest thing that I'm trying to do is be a good person and become more of myself. And sometimes what helps me do that is by seeing other people express themselves and being inspired by them. And sometimes it's just, learning to listen to my own voice, and journaling really helps me to do that. But at the end of the day, I think the goal for me and for hopefully everyone listening is just to become better at being ourselves.
Cool. I love that. Yeah. And I think that's the ultimate pursuit. And it's funny. You're gonna have such a fun time interviewing Jonathan Fields. We talked a lot about that, just like the self-knowledge and self-awareness. So amazing. Thank you so much. I still appreciate that synchronicity that we were literally, that's so funny. Same day. We're like sandwich. We're in a Jonathan Fields sandwich right now.
Seriously.
He doesn't even know it. Lucky him.
So funny. Well, I'll tell him.
Super fun. So thank you so much, Katie. Your website, what is it now?
KatieDalebout.com. I'm also at Katie Dalebout on Snapchat and all of the social medias that are out there.
All the links in the show notes. And then I know you have a Facebook group for your podcast. And the podcast, The official name now is?
Let It Out. And that's also the name of my book, which we should say too. My book is called Let It Out, A Journey Through Journaling. And it's, everywhere that books are sold if people want to check that out.
Great.
And yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much. And this time, I'm not going to let this file go into the abyss. I'm saving it. I'm putting it right into the Dropbox, literally as soon as we hang up. Everyone listening, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you later.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Bye.
I looked at my life, and the decision I made, around age 17, 18 was I saw my life set out for me, the path that my father had crafted and everyone, all the life of everyone else's expectations. And I realized I could be successful by everyone else's standards, but I'd be a failure. If I didn't have myself, if I didn't have who I really was, it was an empty life. I was basically committing a soul suicide. And it was so painful to feel that. And I think so often deep down, we know the truth. We feel the truth. We know the truth. Many of us, we sense this relationship isn't right for me. Is this right for me? We know inside, is this job, what's my life purpose? We have this sense, we have this knowing, but we're either BSing ourselves, lying to ourselves, settling, rationalizing, pretending, playing a game of confusion, because when we're confused, we don't really have to do anything because I'm confused. But deep down, if someone put a gun to our heads or said, I'm going to kill everyone in your life and let you tell me the truth, we will tell the truth because we do know it deep. We have an inkling.